venture down there. It's just a few doors to pass through, and I got the card out of my pocket and strolled down the stairs. Each room had grayish carpet on the floor and simple white plaster walls, and acoustic tile ceilings with LED panel lights. Behind the doors I could hear what sounded like a little girl laughing, and there was a definite feeling of her presence. I followed the exact sequence of colored doors to pass through, and at the last one there was a sudden flash of light and I was back in the lab. There was no sign of the stairs. It was 2:11 and 31 seconds, the exact time on the clock with the sweep second hand displayed when I looked at it as I stepped into the stairs. Nothing else that night except the usual setting up of test fixtures, loading and unloading cards of components into the high and low temperature test chambers. No cooking smells from the break room that night. The third night, I made my first mistake. As I tested some individual product by hand, very repetitive, I began to drift into my imagination about Tiny Tim and his 17-year-old wife when he was 34. I was planning my next content creation in my activism to re-legalize underage marriage. In my mind I pictured Tiptoe Through the Tulips, then suddenly realized I might have hummed or sang ever so softly under my breath a few notes or words of the song. I wondered if that would count as breaking the rule, playing that song, if it's between midnight and 1 a.m. I looked at the clock. 12:14. Across the lab, a chair moved itself away from a workbench. It tilted, just on the verge of falling over, then steadied itself upright. The little girl in the hijab was standing about 20 feet away from me. She appeared completely human-like, no enlarged or unusually colored eyes, no fingers extending like tree branches. Just a very cute preteen Somali Muslim girl in an orange hijab, and flowing purple and blue dress with subtle flower patterns and sequins. She looked at me with a face like she was frustrated, like I was just about to do something she really likes but then didn't. She turned and purposely and with her head high, strutted confidently and directly to the bathroom adjacent to the lab. I knew I was to leave the building immediately for the night if she goes to the bathroom. So that's what I did. Only that as I walked toward the coat rack where I keep my jacket and helmet, the building seemed to stretch, so that was a much longer than normal distance. It also felt like the floor was becoming inclined downhill towards the bathroom where the girl was and uphill to the shop room where I keep my scooter. With some effort I reached my coat and helmet. By now I was envisioning myself as Pee Wee Herman making a heroic escape from his playhouse after the authorities wanted to persecute him for various activities. The activities that are illegal but shouldn't be. I powered on the scooter and was out the door, the electric motor whirring to life. Just as I accelerated out of the parking lot, everything turned much darker than normal at night here. The parking lot has bright street lights and the surrounding urban environment usually makes it relatively well illuminated at night. But now the clouds looked completely black and it seemed like the street lights were on, but they emitted a wavelength that was shifting out of visibility. The streets were desolate as usual at this hour, but everything had a very ominous energy. As I passed an intersection where the crossroad went uphill, my scooter displayed an error message on the screen I'd never seen before. The motor stopped. Looking up the hill on the crossroad, silhouetted against the full moon, was the headless e-bike rider. I could very distinctly recognize the heavy step-through frame bike with the rear fender skirt and the basket on the front, and the hub motor on the front wheel. It was the design of electric bike common to bike share programs. On it, a figure of a man with no head. After a few seconds he turned and vanished beyond the crest of the hill he'd been stopped at. That moment my scooter resumed function. The scooter seemed to be running low on battery much sooner than is normal for a commute ride home from my work. It also sputtered a few more times and I caught fleeting glimpses of what might have been the headless e-bike rider, but I wasn't sure. Arriving at my apartment by 12:50 a.m., I decided I'd report to my manager that I left early because I saw the little girl in the orange hijab go into the bathroom. I chose to leave out the part where I sang or hummed a few notes of Tiptoe Through the Tulips between midnight and 1 a.m. I'm not sure I fully broke the rule. It seemed more like I just brushed against violating it and I stopped just in time. The rules said never to play an audio device with that song, and I wasn't playing any audio device, just humming it. Even then, I didn't even hum an entire sequence of notes. And I'm not Tiny Tim and I don't sound anything like him. At 7:30 a.m. I called the office and told them about leaving early due to little hijab girl seen entering bathroom at 12:14 a.m. Then I asked, just out of curiosity, do you know the origin of the headless e-bike rider ghost? To the receptionist. The receptionist said they didn't know the origin of the headless e-bike rider ghost but that they'd notify my supervisor about my early departure last night and the reason. Then the receptionist said they'd try to find if anyone knew what caused the headless e-bike rider ghost, and if they found any stories they'd tell me. I woke up at 4 p.m. to a message telling me to get to my workplace 30 minutes early because my supervisor wanted to have a meeting with me before the shift. I had a feeling I might be getting reprimanded. Perhaps they knew somehow I bent a rule. I arrived and my supervisor was in the parking lot. Instead of looking like he was about to reprimand me, he gave a look of honest fear for my safety. He told me that the consequences of not following the rules of the night shift are dire. He added that because I almost crossed the boundary, the various anomalies might happen more often. For instance, the cooking aroma from the break room might become especially strong. It's more likely that the downstairs will appear or the little hijab girl will show up behind me in the bathroom mirror. Just as I was about to enter the building, he spoke about the headless e-bike rider. The headless e-bike rider was a well-known social activist in a cause to legalize adult with child sexual activity. He had a cause to make it popular and ubiquitous for adult men to have child brides. He quickly infuriated the establishment. Some of his enemies were a feminist roller derby club. These roller derby girls hacked into an account he had with a bike-share service he often used. They traced him one afternoon as he attended a prayer at a local mosque. While he was in prayer, the roller derby members spread gravel on the pavement on a steep downhill and curvy road they knew he often rode to and from that mosque. They also reduced the pressure in the front tire of the bike and slightly bent the front rim of the bike, so the front wheel would have a wobble that would compromise the stability of the bike. Then they hacked into the bike-share software in order that the specific bike they sabotaged would appear unavailable to anyone except their target, and to their target that's the only bike that would appear to him on his app as available to unlock. That would ensure that he and nobody else would ride the sabotaged bike, and it would completely look like an accident. After his mosque prayer, he rode the bike and lost control and fell on the steep hill. He flew so his neck hit the edge of a street sign, cutting his head off. He was given a Muslim burial but his head was never found. Now he rides forever in search of his missing head. The supervisor drove away, leaving me to enter the building. I started work as normal, checked everything, lights were in the safe conditions, and the tamper evidence seal on that one fridge in the break room was untouched. I happened to look up and saw movement in the electron microscope room. There was a feeling that little hijab girl's presence was less than normal close to me. 10:30 p.m. I see some more movement. She steps out of the electron microscope room and into the adjacent XRF spectrometer room. I get up from my workbench and walk over there just as she's powering up the XRF machine. I looked straight at her and tell her sternly, don't play with that. She powered down the XRF spectrometer, and with a slightly ashamed of herself look on her face, left the XRF room, turned off the lights in there, and walked to the other side of the lab out of view. 1:30 a.m. Normally my middle of the night lunch. I smell an intense aroma of delicious cooking from the break room. 1:38, smell vanished, safe to take lunch. Uneventful. 2:30 a.m. I sensed warmth while I arranged a batch of components on the test card to load into the temperature chamber. The little hijab girl was cuddling up to me, trying to climb into my lap. I left my workbench at once. Entering the break room, I noticed a stack of clear plastic disposable cups next to the water cooler. I took one of those and yanked open the fridge by the window, breaking the seal and revealing the fresh, unopened 2-liter bottle of Sprite. I uncapped the Sprite, saying I got yes while pouring the Sprite into the cup, overflowing it onto the floor. It splashed all over my shoes and the bubbly fluid spread across most of the floor of the break room. Once the Sprite bottle was empty, I hurled the cup with a deliberately random fling of my hand. It hit the ceiling and splashed across the tables and walls. The sensation throughout the entire building was completely different than before. It felt more like what it felt like when I was on day shift. It remained that way the rest of the night. The following night I discovered the break room had been thoroughly cleaned and the seal on the door of the fridge by the window was dated that day. I made it to just about my first break time, then heard a door opening and closing repeatedly, like someone was turning the knob to open the door, then closing it, repeatedly. The sound was from the conference room. I looked in there and it was the bathroom door opening and closing on its own. The light in the bathroom was off and the toilet paper was rapidly unrolling by itself into the bowl. I immediately left the building as I had been instructed in the event of the lights going out and or the door opening in the conference room bathroom. It was Friday night and that made for a nice treat. I got to start the weekend early. I've been on that night shift for a year now. I've had to deploy the Sprite 3 times. Had to banish little hijab girl from the XRF spectrometer at least 3 times. Almost every week she's using the electron microscope, often for hours on end. Downstairs has appeared twice. Both times I've stayed away and not ventured down and I've been careful not to let any objects fall when the downstairs appear. I am Galileo 2333 and this is my first Creepypasta.